I know you've been going through all these Zoom meetings, all of these on-camera things that you probably never really were sure you wanted to agree to, especially as real estate agents. Our office meetings, our meetings with our clients, we are having even like our continuing education, everything has been happening in these Zoom meetings. And so we're so interested in finding out what we can do.
So I actually have an acronym, BLEACH, BLEACH, and of course the L is lighting.
Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
Hello. This is Jennifer J. Hammond. And I'm so excited we have Diana Howles here today. And I'm so excited we are going to clean up I know you've been going through all these Zoom meetings, all of these on-camera things that you probably never really were sure you wanted to agree to, especially as real estate agents. Our office meetings, our meetings with our clients, we are having even like our continuing education, everything has been happening in these Zoom meetings. And so we're so interested in finding out what we can do. So Diana, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
It's such a pleasure. So let's start with some of your tips. I mean, one of the most important ones I'm always going to say is lighting. So I know people do this wrong all the time. So let's talk about lighting.
Oh, that's a great one. That's right. So I actually have an acronym, BLEACH, BLEACH, and of course the L is lighting. So the most important thing is that everyone who's on camera lights from the front, not the back. If you have a window behind you, move your device. And then of course, really, we want to look for even lighting. People want to see your eyes, your face, your mouth. And so make sure there's not shadows on one side, light on the other, and watch out for those hot spots. If you have a window to your side, sometimes you've seen really harsh lights or halos. Those are distracting to anybody you're interacting with. So even soft lighting and light from the front is a great takeaway.
So one thing I'm going to go ahead and ask you, because this one I've seen come up so often with people, especially when they come on to the podcast, and that's people who have glasses and then they're using the ring lights or whatever. And it's like, then all of a sudden they have all these reflections in their glasses and we can't see their eyes anymore. It starts to be not only distracting, but I think in a weird way, it makes you start to distrust somebody if you can't see their eyes, right?
It is a really important point. Sometimes they call that donuts. When you see donuts in somebody's glass from those ring lights. Yeah. And those ring lights are bright and they do work because you have them on the front. But sometimes if it's really distracting, sometimes if you can take off your glasses, that can work better because it's all about focusing on you, your message, what you're saying, rather than all those other things that can take people's attention away. What happens is light catches at a certain angle. And even when you get it just right, if you move your head even just a little bit, you can still get some of those reflections. So in a major studio, we could make that work. But sometimes just with informal Zoom, just taking those glasses off, if that works for you, can sometimes help.
Yeah, if you don't have to read something, I've done that with a lot of guests. If they're not reading anything and they're just talking to me about whatever their expertise is, I'm like, just take the glasses off so it doesn't look so distracting, because we do want to see your face. And it gets really weird. But you mentioned a soft light source, and I think it's really important as well to talk a little bit before we leave and hop onto some of the other tips. The thing that I've also noticed with people is that they don't know the difference, like if they're in an office or wherever, because so many people are doing this from home as well, the different times of the day, how the natural light is going to interact with whatever artificial lights, whether it's an overhead light or whether it's the ring lights or what it is. So will you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, Jennifer. So even today, I have a window to the side of me, and I actually have the blinds closed because you're right. In those harsh times of the day when the sunshine comes streaming in, you have what I call those hot lights, right? Hot spots, which are so distracting. So I use what is called an Elgato Air light stand, and you can actually adjust the color temperature from your phone. It's so convenient. So incandescent lighting has more reddish hues and natural lighting has blue hues. And so if you are going with just the daylight, then you might use more of the blues. If you're just using incandescent, use more of the reds. Try not to blend the two. But there's so many tools and technologies available to us today to really kind of make that work, because it's so important, as you said, to build rapport with good lighting.
Well, and I was going to say, the other thing I think is really interesting is that the lighting, there's so many aspects to it, because there's a lot of times the overhead one is the worst one. So you need to figure out, as you said, even lighting, and there's different ones. And then you just said the colors. And I've seen those on some of the lamps where people are like, so what am I trying to do? Blue, pink, brown, they're not sure. And I think a lot of it is just trial and error. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Because everyone's environment is different, from boardroom to a new property to your basement. And you mentioned a really good point about the ceiling lights. A lot of times I see different folks on different virtual platforms where the ceiling light is on, and again, it looks like a big distraction. So turn off those ceiling lights. Again, your lighting from the front usually works better. And I know sometimes those ceiling fans behind you, make sure that you are not positioned so that it looks like it's right above your head, or spinning is worse. It looks like a spinning hat. Again, we're doing everything we can to minimize distraction and focus content and message where it should be.
Absolutely. And I think it is so important that people understand that. So I wanted to see more about your bleach, your acronym. So let's talk about, what are some of the other letters in that acronym that we should know?
Yeah. So really, bleach is sort of a helpful way for us to think about how can we clean up our on-camera image. So B stands for background. And so we know you have a beautiful virtual background there of a property, and I have a blurred background, but we really want to minimize, right, the distraction. People know in the real estate business, realtors know that first impressions count. When you walk into a home, you turn on the lights to make it look bigger. You clear off the kitchen counters to make it look bigger. We do the same thing on camera, right? We minimize distraction in the background. You know about lighting is L. E is actually expressions, when appropriate, when conducive, actually using facial expression, looking at the camera lens, for eye contact. All of those things are helpful. Gestures and body movement are very different on camera. And then, so we have B, L, E. A is the angle of the camera. Important not to do an odd angle when you're on a video conferencing platform. And then C is the clothing or even colors that you wear. And then H is headroom, talking about how much headroom should we have when we frame ourselves in the camera.
Well, I think all of those are really important. So let's expand on some of those. One of them is the weird angles. I just did an interview today with someone who is just an amazing guest for so many reasons. However, not used to the Zoom world, much more into the television and just like showing up, never having to have to do any of this stuff for themselves. And it was hilarious because it was way down beneath them and is looking up in this weird way where I was saying, oh no, we can start anytime, but I really want to help you with, like, go grab some books or something and raise the camera, because the angle was just not flattering. And I thought, I'm promising he's not going to like this video later on.
That's exactly right, Jennifer. We call that the double chin angle, right? So the device, usually a laptop or could be a tablet, is way down here. And as a result, the individual is looking down. So not only is it not flattering, it is distracting, as you experienced on the other side. And the other thing too, is it doesn't really establish even rapport, right? We're building likability, we're building rapport, we're building relationship. So having kind of that peer level, looking at each other is more important. Some people just elevate their device. If you want to find something sturdy, you mentioned boxes. Some people use game boards. They take, a very sturdy game board, anything to kind of elevate that device, put it kind of close to your hairline. So again, that your eye contact is right there near the lens, and that helps establish relationship so much more effectively. It's also intimidating, right, to have this sort of presence looking down at you. We are uncomfortable with personal space being right there. It feels invasive, and we don't want that distraction when you're working with other professionals.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to put it. The other thing that I think is really important when you're talking about, so not only the angle, but you talked about the movement of your hands. Now, I'm somebody who loves to talk with my hands, but also I have learned, of course, that it is really important to not move quickly. And I've learned that in so many ways. Ironically, being in the Washington, D.C. area, I have learned don't move your hands fast because people can misinterpret it for being something that it's not. Anyway, on a Zoom call, it's really important for so many reasons to make sure that people still feel engaged. And a lot of that just has to do with being on camera secrets. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, E is for expressions. It is important, if you can, to frame yourself so that gestures are in the camera. But you're right, when we move them so fast, which you can do in real life, right? When you're in person, we do gesture fast. But what happens in video, it's still after still after still, and they're shown successively to us really quickly, right? That's how animation works.
Yeah.
And so if you were in a professional studio, no problem. But here with sort of our video platforms, we slow down movement. Otherwise, it can be really distracting. We also notice as you move toward camera, notice how everything becomes gigantic, which is another distraction. So I like to think about, in a pandemic world, we learn to live with plexiglass, right? I try to imagine a plexiglass right in front of me, and I keep my gestures within that frame, within that field, so that we don't have this growing gigantic in front of you. So gesturing, make sure it is framed well, but keep them here and slow them down. We slow down movement on camera.
So, and then also looking at the camera lens, you talked about that a little bit. I think it's interesting because I've also watched sometimes and I'm like, oh, it looks like I'm looking up at the camera if I look up at the lens, and I know that it's about the level, but can you kind of expand a little bit more about that? Because it's so easily, even myself, done incorrectly often.
Yeah. And, when realtors or bankers or attorneys are doing meetups, or you're meeting with colleagues or even clients, I realize you're referencing all sorts of things, right? You're looking at all sorts of documents on multiple monitors. But for those really important points, when you ask the question, those questions that are so important, you really want that eye contact, right? And we simulate that through the camera lens. So what I would suggest is, even if you get on a video conferencing platform and you do test records of, okay, now I'm looking here, now I'm looking here, now I'm looking here, play it back and find the exact point by your camera lens where it looks like you're making eye contact, because it can be really distracting when you look above or below or to the side. So again, we don't expect you to constantly be looking at the lens, but remember, it's a conduit. You're talking to people on those really important points. Bring your eye contact back to us.
And I think that also, like you talked about hand gestures, we're in the mirror situation. Like so often you want to point at somebody, and again, the little boxes will move and you don't realize that they can move depending on how somebody's recorded it. You can change it afterwards. So when you're pointing at things, especially other people, you need to notice that it's not going to be the same.
That's a great point. Yes, it really can change. And so not referencing in that way, you can reference verbally, you can be descriptive in your language, but not in the pointing, as you said so well.
And thank you. And so now here's another great one that I think is so important is, what do you wear on camera? The solid colors versus the fine stripes and clothes. And also, I also am somebody who I love to sparkle. I love sparkles, but we also know that even like I have my butterfly on, and the light makes you not actually be able to see it so well. So you have to be really careful. And will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, when you watch a news anchor, for example, they often dress, or at least the females do, in these solid colors, as you are wearing today, Jennifer, a solid color. And so am I. Yeah. Yay. So the greens and the blues and the tans and the browns and all of those really pop. And that's what we want, right? So solid colors work the best on camera. But as you mentioned, sometimes our jewelry can be distracting, especially if it does catch the light. So just notice it on camera. I would test it ahead of time and just see how that works. Know if you move, if it's going to catch light or be distracting. I've asked sometimes in the past, I had a client remove a bracelet just because it was really creating audio noise, every time she sort of naturally, it was creating some ambient noise. So we just had to remove it just for that particular discussion. So really just kind of looking at that. And then as you mentioned, to watch out for those really fine lines, right? Because it creates a shimmering effect on camera. So we stay away from stripes, even especially those really, really tight stripes, because again, we want to focus people on the message and what we're saying.
Exactly. A lot of it just is about learning how, and it's funny because it reminds me a little bit about staging a home for sale.
Yes, exactly.
You're just really trying to focus on the things that are important and not minimize the things that are not important. And, one of the things that people, I can't tell you how many times, you're talking to a seller and you're like, well, I need you to remove anything that's personal, political, or religious. Yep. And they're like, what? And especially the wedding photos, I feel like you just said to kill their first, child or something. I feel like I've just done the worst, awful thing ever. Right. And it took me a while because I had so many strong reactions when people would get so angry at me that I started to not want to talk about it. And then I saw really bad what happens if you have that on there. And so I realized how important it is to just really be able to get people to focus on what's important and what's not. And so let's talk about the centering thing, because you definitely see people who go way over to one side, or they go, all sorts of moving around. And why is it important to be centered?
Yeah, I think at least in this frame, now there's many modes, right? I don't know if our listeners have done the immersive view in Zoom or in Microsoft Teams. It's together mode where it can put us all in a virtual one background, which is really fun. But when we're in our individual little screens, it's important for us to stand out, right? You want to pop as the main speaker. And so centering actually frames you nicely. And we sort of have this bias that whatever is in the frame is important for me to notice. So as you mentioned, staging your room, it really is exactly like what you said, taking the personality out of a property or a home that you want to put up for sale. And here what we're doing is you don't even need to remove everything from the room. You just need to remove it from off the frame. Right. So sometimes we just tell clients, move it like 6 feet over. It can still stay in your room, but as long as it's not on camera, it won't be distracting. So we are staging your background.
Exactly. Okay. Now I know one of the other, and I would say one of the most important parts. Now, of course, for me in podcasting, it's critical, but it's also really important for every single meeting you're doing. And that's the sound quality. So let's talk about it. I can't tell you how many times people are like, they don't have any kind of external mic or anything. And boy, it sounds like they are in the middle of a tunnel, a wind tunnel at that. Like it's horrible to try to figure out exactly what they're saying, but from their viewpoint, they don't understand the difference.
That's right. With video and modern technology, poor audio is even worse than poor video. So important. So the main important point to take away for our listeners today, and they've maybe experienced this already too, is to not use your built-in microphone with your device. Do not use that. Instead, invest in an external microphone. There are many affordable ones and really nice ones as well. But it's also important to know that every microphone interacts and interfaces differently with the circuitry in your device. So for example, we bought a really nice microphone, but it didn't work as well on my device, but it worked very well on my business partner's device. So you have to try it out, but definitely invest in whether it be a headset, external microphone, AirPods, earpods. We have found that if you wire yourself in, it's more reliable and more sturdy. I know some folks prefer wireless, but it's not always as consistently reliable.
I love that you said that, because that was the next thing I was going to talk about. Is I have had so many interviews where people have the earbuds, the ones that are wireless that they put in their ear. And the interesting thing is, number one, we all know that Wi-Fi isn't always stable, but the Bluetooth connection also has its issues. And in the middle of the interview, or in the middle of the most important story that you're sharing with the world,
right?
Yeah, and it goes crazy, and you can't. And it's all of a sudden, it's almost like you're listening to the lottery numbers, and you're just like, the one number you didn't hear. Did I win 78 million, or did I win nothing? And you're like, it went out because you are on a wireless mic. And so understanding that, as well as the other thing that I think is interesting, and you probably know a little bit more about this, I think it's fascinating. I've seen it happen even myself when I've tried to use the wireless ones, is that it decides to fight with other devices. Like if
Oh,
it's ever
yes.
been paired as a Bluetooth to the iPad or to the phone, or all of a sudden it'll decide, well, now I want to be paired with the iPhone. I don't want to be paired with your computer anymore. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm trying to figure it out. And sometimes you don't actually figure it out until after the recording is done, and then you can't fix it. So
they have a mind of their own, don't they? They really do. And, it's just so important. As you mentioned, you can sound really tinny. It can sound like you're in a cave. There can be an echo. There can be feedback. You really want to minimize all of that audio distraction if you can.
Yeah, the audio is so much more important than I think anybody really takes the time to understand, and really understanding that it's not just about what you hear, it's what the other people in the audience are hearing, whether it's one person or 200 people. You really need to do that. And so last but not least, we're going to talk about, let's talk about professional dress. This is something that I see is super funny, especially being not only in real estate, but in podcasting. Boy, is this a different.
Yes, it's a different realm, isn't it? And so what's really fun about this is everyone knows, and you've been living with you've experienced a pandemic. Dressing on top professional is really what we care about. We care about what is in the frame, and you can be comfortable on the bottom. You can be barefoot in slippers, which is really great. But on top, you are professional. So you also want to make sure that what you are discussing is your background is conducive to that, right? So if you're meeting with your clients, or if you're meeting with the attorneys or the bankers or the title professionals, whatever it may be, because it leaves a first impression. And realtors know more than anyone else the importance of a first impression, right?
Yeah.
Which is why we stage properties and all of that. So you're doing the same thing with your image, your professional image, and who you are every time you interact in a video call.
I agree. And so I said last thing, but I have one more last thing. And this is one because I saw this happen. I've seen this happen a few times. You just said lawyers. And I thought it was so funny because I was like, of all people, I never thought lawyers would be the one that I would be having this conversation with. And I think it's very funny. And it's interesting because I've watched this. This is so different depending on where you are in the country too, because in Washington, D.C., I would say it's much more business style. When you go out to California, you'll see it's more laid back. Florida, it's more laid back. I mean, there's certain places, even in the Caribbean. I was licensed down in the U.S. Virgin Islands for a while, and it's interesting how different people dress and such, but there's still a level of professionalism, shall I say. But I think the one thing that I see are animals.
Oh,
all the time. They come right across the screen, and I love animals. So I think it's super fun. But it's not always the most business like, right?
Right. If your animal calls attention to itself, so it's purring or it's barking or something like that, you definitely want to see if they could be in another location. But if that pet can be quiet and is sleeping on a bed, it actually creates a great interchange. Some people will socially open up more because they can relate to a pet. They'll say, what's the name? What's the breed? And all of a sudden you're connecting, and it really is all about connection, right? And so sometimes pets, as long as they're not disturbing, can actually be a bridge for better communication and also still building relationship, finding that connection.
I agree. It's funny because I've seen my brother, we've both been on group calls where we're on some kind of training, and it's hilarious because he has a cat who just does not like it when he's on the computer. And it's hilarious because Ginger is the cat's name, and Ginger will come onto the camera and then all of a sudden block the camera, and really has gotten good at which buttons turn the whole thing off. And it is super funny to watch, but I always feel bad because I feel like he misses out on stuff when that happens. But I agree. I love animals, and it does make me connect with people more when I get to see their animals, because most of them, I'm never going to be going to their home. I mean, with most of our
Yeah.
meetings. So it's super cool to see them. Although I gotta say, it can be very distracting, especially if they're mischievous animals.
I think Ginger wants his job, but that is so predictable, right? Where they walk over the keyboard and just take over. I want your attention, right? That's what they say.
And I think it's also very much about, come on, it's time for us to play.
Yeah.
Stop that work thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Where's the food? Yeah.
Or where's the food? They
Right.
all want, the cats and dogs. Where's the food? I want to know where the food is. So I want people to know more about you. So if they want to find out more about you and how to find you, your website, social media, anything, where do they go?
Sure, they can go to our website. So we can be found at www.howlesassociates.com. That's howlesassociates.com. Howles with an S, Howles, associates plural. And I have a new book coming out also in May, and that's available on Amazon right now. And that book is called Next Level Virtual Training. Advance your facilitation. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to being on camera and how to do that well, where I also break down the BLEACH acronym for how we can clean up our camera image.
I think that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And as you know, I always love to end with a yay. So I'm going to ask you to lift your voice and say yay with me. Okay?
Okay, let's do it.
3, 2, 1. Yay!
Woo!
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And if you want more help in getting from where you are to where you want to be, I want to encourage you to listen to the Jennifer Hammond Show